And speaking of eccentric individuals, you're from the Ohio area where the Sheik, the original Sheik, was very popular. You want to just tell us your memories of him growing up? And I believe you actually worked for him, what it was like to work for the man.
The original Sheik was terrifying. As a kid, he was, small guy, but he was larger than life. And because he believed in his own gimmick. And you believed in his gimmick. I see grown people, when he go at a crowd, grown people just separate like the Red Sea. And he was so effective at it. Even after I'd gotten into the wrestling business and I was on shows with him initially, I was like 18, 19, 20 years old, I was still terrified in the locker room of him coming in and, the myth that if you had to wrestle him, he had the razor on the end of the pencil and he'd just gig you and you wouldn't have a question or, he wouldn't have a choice. He'd just do whatever he wanted with you. And he wasn't a wrestler, you know what I mean? But he was a guy that had such a persona that it terrified you. And even when working for him, you were always like walking on eggshells, but you were afraid that you'd just say something that would set him off and you're out this crazy guy would come, just like what you'd seen in the ring. But it was farthest from the truth. I mean, it was nothing like that.
What were the payoffs like working
for
him?
Terrible. But what I understand now. At the time when I was that age, I didn't understand it as well as I do now. And that is that your value is based on what your potential of selling tickets is, and that's it. So a lot of times I was Poom at that time, which is +1 on the match, or additional all-stars, or other great bouts. That means that my name was not on that poster at all. So whatever they paid me was whatever they paid me, because I was not a factor in how many people were in that building. Do you understand? It's not like today everybody believes, well, I trained and I've paid my dues and I'm entitled to. You're not entitled to shit. Make that perfectly clear. You're not. Just because you're a wrestler and you're good doesn't mean anything. You serve one of two purposes in this business. You're either the thing that sells tickets or you're one of the things that helps sell tickets. There is no third option. So if your name's not even featured on the poster, how much of a factor were you in how many people attended that show? Well, then what percentage do you deserve of that house? Right. So, payoffs when I first started were abysmal.
What was the Sheik like to work with? He's such a legend in this business.
There are very few people. Valentine had that ability just with a stare to get a reaction. The Sheik was one guy who, he never talked, always had a manager, whether it was the Farouk or whoever that spoke for him, and he wasn't like a physically imposing guy. He wasn't that big physically, but he would wear that typical, he was Lebanese, he would wear the thing with the head thing around the head and keep his head down, and when he would look at you, fire in his eyes. And if somebody can possibly intimidate you with a look, he had that intensity about him that, even if you weren't standing having a conversation and he walked into a room and he turned, and if he singled you out, and looked at you and stared, he'd make you want to take a couple steps back or leave the room. He just had, in the wrestling business, we refer to it as it. What is it? I can't tell you what it is. Probably the closest thing would be, I can't think of it. It's just it. Something that person has that everybody else doesn't have. Later on, the Sheik came in for a series of matches and just in the dressing room talking about it. I told Sheik, actually, I said, I really wanted to be a wrestler someday. And maybe this is as far as my dreams are going to carry me. And Sheik says, well, hey man, I promote Michigan, Ohio. Get your tights, come on out, I'll put you in the ring, see what you can do. And I just, shocked, didn't expect that conversation, just making casual conversation. So my parents lived in Detroit, and I was going to go out and see him, and it was like a 4-day weekend, so a couple weeks in advance, I called the Sheik. And, you know, a lot of people knock the Sheik, you know, oh, he didn't pay that well and this and whatever. Just like I never met Nick Goulas. A lot of guys knocked Nick Goulas for whatever. And I learned very early on to never judge anybody, promoter, other wrestler, whatever, except based on my personal experience. And so the Sheik was good to his word when I called, and he said, when's the weekend? I said, okay. Now I worked TV. The Friday they did TV in Dayton, Ohio. I worked a TV match. I didn't have anything Saturday and Sunday. They did TV in Walled Lake, Michigan, where they would do like 3 weeks of TV. And then somebody on Friday said, well, we got to go to Pittsburgh tomorrow to work TV, and they're short somebody. What are you doing? I said, I'm not doing anything. Well, will you go? Want to go? Yeah, I'll go. So the next day I rode with them over to Pittsburgh to do TV. And my first match in Dayton was a tag match with the Hells Angels. And then when I got to Pittsburgh, the match they put me in was a single match with Killer Kowalski. So I have if I was scripting my life to say my first professional single match was against Killer Kowalski.
You know, me personally, I never met him. I never met the original Sheik. So all I can say is I really couldn't tell you whatsoever. But, well, I did actually end up wrestling on his promotion on a few different occasions with his brothers and that. And then his nephew, Sabu, also, you know, getting to know him, being on shows with Sabu, and actually wrestled Sabu a few times.
The original Sheik?
The original Sheik, yeah.
Yeah, I was my original trainer was Guido Mongol, who was a champion there for Vince Sr. And he trained me and broke me in, and then I worked. He was good friends with Eddie Farhad. And I was teaching and coaching in outside of Columbus, Ohio. So they ran Columbus and they ran Detroit and Toledo and Akron and Canton. So it was easy for me, especially off season, not during football or track in the winter. And he treated me good. I mean, he paid me probably much better than I had earned at that time. I think with the potential that, you know, I was going to stick around and work for him. But there was a big hullabaloo going on with some of the guys that worked with him or under him, and they sort of sabotaged him. And he went to Japan, and all of a sudden, his good buddies are now working a promotion without him. So he had to fly back and sort of salvage his company. But as far as my relationship with him, he was good to me.
Did you ever wrestle him in a one?
No, I was just starting at the time. I wasn't in the caliber that he would have been in.
Who would you say is better between the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher? Who would you say is the better wrestler between those two?
Well, there's no question about the Sheik. Because the minute you touch the Abbey, he wanted to cut himself. Yeah. And I tell him, man, you're bleeding all over me.
Yeah.
I don't want you bleeding all over me. But the Sheik would actually take a couple bumps. And Sheik wasn't a great worker, but he had great psychology. He knew when to run. He knew when to look back and, With Abbey, he just wanted to keep coming. And the more you hit him, and, you know, he had blades on every finger. Yeah. And the minute you hit him, he's bleeding all over you. I wore white boots and white drum. I used to tell him, I said, man, why are you bleeding so much? I said, if I get a cut or something, on me. But look at him now. His head looks like a canoe.
Yeah.
You know, I just seen him. We seen him last year at WrestleMania, but we seen him at what do you call it? Yeah, the WrestleCon. And he was in a wheelchair, can't walk. But I didn't feel sorry for him because, you know, me and him, we actually started together. We went in Vancouver together. And then when he got the big push, he kind of forgot about me, like, I'm a little bit better than you. But he was, and he was making more money. But I always believe what goes around comes around. And it came back. You know, he was the first millionaire in Japan. They never seen a guy like this. The minute you touch him, he's got all the...
First memories of wrestling, well, I was probably, 3 years old or younger, and watching my uncle on TV.
And was he your favorite?
Oh, yeah, of course.
He was attacked a lot. He's probably the most attacked heel of all time. Did he ever tell you any stories about some of those attacks?
Yeah, but he also said, to mind my own business, not to, live his life. Don't try to copy him.
Was there any favorite match of the Sheik's you had growing up watching?
Well, one of the favorite opponents was Bobo Brazil. He was one of the favorite ones.
Did you ever meet him?
Oh yeah, many times.
What was he like?
Super nice guy, giant, like 6'9", giant, super deep voice, nice guy.
What was the Sheik like outside the ring as your uncle?
He was mean, and he was the Sheik outside the ring too, but he was also my uncle. He had some compassion, but not all. Like, he was hard to be around.
Did you ever see him wrestle in person?
Oh yeah.
And you had some experience with sponsors because you were over there with the Sheik?
Yes, my mafia sponsors, and yeah, yeah.
I guess he was a legend over there. Did you notice when you were over there with him, he was treated even more differently than...
Yeah. Even now, if he's alive now, they still treat him differently than they treat anybody now. They treat him like he was a movie star, not like a funny athlete.
Did he ever tell you who he liked working the most?
Yeah, oh yeah. He liked the guy I was talking about earlier, Bobo Brazil.
Now, Kevin told me this story about the ring catching on fire. You also talk about it in your book. I guess Sheik almost died.
Well, sort of. Yeah, the ring didn't catch on fire. It was a fire match, and the ring was set on fire. And it got too hot, and then so I jumped out first, and the Japanese jumped out, and the Sheik jumped out. But Sheik doesn't jump out. He had to crawl out slower than we did. So he got burned by the flames close to his back. Like, he wasn't engulfed in the flame, but he got too close to the flame.
And it was sucking the oxygen out of the air.
Yeah, he couldn't hear or breathe, and it scared the shit out of us. And I was they thanked me later for being the first one to jump. That wasn't a choice. That was easy.
I hope you got extra pay for that.
No.
Were the fans upset that the match didn't actually happen?
No, because after the match, she carried on wrestling and stuff. I was throwing water on him, and he was getting mad because he wanted to still throw fire at Onita. So I'm throwing water on him and getting him wet, but he still chased Onita around, fought him a little bit into the crowd, and caught him on fire. And then we went off our way.
Did he ever tell you any stories about his time in the military?
Yeah, a little bit.
I guess wrestling's nothing compared to what he would have experienced there.
Well, and he was in the military twice as my uncle and once as my other uncle. Close to the same name.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was he, infantry, or do you know what trade he was?
He's a tank commander, I think, something like that.
Did he experience actual war
combat?
action?
Yeah.
Now, the Sheik was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Were you surprised they put him in?
No, and I only was shooting for it because I wanted my aunt to get the payoff. Other than that, I wasn't doing it for the honor. It's like, there was no honor in that. I knew that, and my uncle wouldn't be honored either. But he'd expect me to get my aunt a payoff, so I did. And but it was no honor. I don't give a shit about it. If they put me into it, I'll take it for the payoff.
Do you think he would have been proud of you with all of your accomplishments if he'd still be around today?
Yeah, yes and no. He'd also be saying, see, I told you they're going to steal that table. I told you they're going to steal that. I told you. He'd say that.
Is there any younger family members related to the Sheik that would ever get into wrestling?
No, I don't know. I was poking around, but I don't think so. I've even asked a few of my nephews to get in it, and well, yeah, and they never come meet me to train.
So the legacy is going to be over when you retire?
Looks that way.
Did you like the I Like to Hurt People movie about the Sheik?
Yeah. It was supposed to be a different kind of movie, and it ran out of funds or whatever, and they just chopped it up into making it just wrestling. My favorite tag team partner was my uncle, the Sheik, and then also Rob. Any
favorite match of you and tagging with the Sheik?
Yeah, a few of them. Me and him against Tarzan Goto, and I mean, me and the Sheik against Tarzan Goto and Terry Funk in Kawasaki Stadium one time. That was awesome.
How did you come up with the triple?
See, when he got old, his good matches, all of his good matches were Terry Funk. Like, when you wrestle other guys, they didn't really know how to wrestle him because they were still kind of young. But Terry, he was young, but he knew how to wrestle Sheik as an older guy, and he enhanced Sheik's wrestling more than anybody.
At that time, and I think most people at that time thought wrestling was not always on the level. and I was one of them, because the guys back then would do some tag team matches, some silly spots where a guy get caught in the ropes, they get the partner and use him as a battering ram. And so I knew it wasn't all real. But the first time I saw the Sheik, I actually thought the building moved with the energy. And he wrestled Spirisarion, who was like the number 2 or 3 babyface. And this is when Vince Sr. had it, and the Sheik destroyed him in like 3 minutes. It was like, whoa, what's wrong with this? And I thought, this guy has to be real. You know, here's the thing. The rest of it's fake, but this guy's real, you know, in his matches. So we've talked about it off camera that I still think people want to believe that somebody's a badass.
What was so special about the Sheik? He's obviously one of the greatest wrestlers ever, but in your opinion, what separated him?
He never broke kayfabe. He was the Sheik 24 hours a day. Jimmy Cornette talks about him and Bobby Fulton. When we were on the Great American Bash, I begged Dusty to use him in Detroit. And Dusty said, well, okay, we'll do it. And Jimmy and Tommy, Bobby Fulton rather, saw the Sheik pull up. He waited till the first match. They pulled his limo into the building, and he got out with his caviar on and his 3-piece suit, but no shirt and a vest and all his gold. And he never talked to anybody. It was so crazy. He'd have dinners at his house for the boys a couple of times a year, and the heels ate together and the baby faces ate in another room. And Terry Funk tells a story that he got arrested in Amarillo. He went to cash his check. He was making them believe that he didn't understand what's going on. He made a big commotion. They got scared and called the police, and the police took him out. He just was the Sheik 24 hours a day.
And I understand he was one of the most attacked wrestlers of all time. Did you ever witness anything like that with him?
Well, I had a job in Japan because of him. I worked for FMW, and Sabu was there too. And when he wrestled in a single match, Sabu and I would go to the ring with him to make sure. The Japanese weren't violent, but they have a thing over there. If you touch something that you're really scared of, you get good luck, and everybody would try to touch him. And he would chase them out of the arena, and 5 minutes later, he'd come back in the arena from outside, and the people would come too, and every chair was set up. I mean, he was a big draw. In fact, what made Japan hot again was a famous match with Abdullah and the Sheik against the Funks. That turned the Funks babyface there, and they had a run. They're still wrestling there. And
That was where Terry got his arm cut up.
yeah, with the fork from Abdullah.
And what happened with, I don't know if you were booking in WCW at this time, but the Sheik did manage Sabu
Yes.
at Halloween Havoc. Why did that not work out, that situation?
Well, there was a spot they did. Jerry Lynn and Sabu did a spot, and they didn't tell the Sheik. And they both came over the top and landed on him and broke his leg and his hip. So that's what happened to him.
What was the Sheik like in real life in your personal dealings with him?
I've heard a lot of people say that he wasn't a good payoff man. He was very good to me. I had a great guarantee when I worked for him, and he paid everything: room, food, transportation. He was great.
With the Sheik, what happened that his territory really died off in later years, went from being so hot to...
Well, if you go back and look at, in the 60s, the wrestlers that came off of national TV, meaning Chicago TV, Bruiser, Vern, Wilbur Snyder, Sheik, all wrestled on top too long. And the Sheik wrestled on top too long. He kept the belt way too long, and his matches started to be shorter and shorter. And then he did the same thing in Toronto. He went to Toronto, and he would want to get home to Detroit that night, and he'd make sure that he could catch the plane. The wrestlers themselves got caught into this program that they didn't, if they developed younger talent, they only brought them to a certain level to support their own asses, and didn't step away and give the younger kids a break. If the Sheik had stepped away, and if the Bruiser had stepped away, and if Vern had stepped away, like the time Hogan went there, and they didn't give him the strap, and they kept on doing the Dusty finish with Hogan and Bockwinkel. And Nick was a fabulous performer, but the people got tired of seeing the same guys over and over again, and then you start to think you're creative, and you're thinking of ways to keep the belt on the guy, and you start to cheat the fans out of a win.
And you wrestled the original Sheik, I guess, once maybe. I don't know.
No, more than once.
More than
Yeah,
once?
yeah, more than once. I wrestled him several times. I remember the first time I wrestled him, I kept asking him, what's going to be the finish? I tell you in the ring, kid. I tell you in the ring. I said, well, what we doing tonight? I tell you in the ring, kid. Tell you in the ring, kid. So I even went to ask Ole, because this was in Georgia. I said, Ole, what we going to do? He said, oh, don't worry about it. Sheik been there a long time. He take care of it. He sure what to do. So as I'm getting to the ring, the referee come over and say, he's going to jump you. So I said, okay. So I crawled through the rope. The Sheik jumped me. Beat me up. I'm selling. I look up. He's going back to the dressing room. So I said, what in the hell? So I jump out the ring. I went and got him. Made a little comeback. I took him back to the ring, hit him a little bit more. I headbutted him. He rolled out. He limped back, went back to the dressing room. He wasn't going to go into the ring, beat me up, leave me, and go back to the dressing room. That's what he wanted to do. That's why he wouldn't talk to me about nothing.
Which would have killed you in the town.
Yep. But Ole Anderson said, you are the luckiest guy that ever lived. I said, why that? He said, you always carry a knife. He said, you're lucky he didn't cut you. He said, you're lucky he didn't cut you. But he let me take him out the ring. I gave him 1 or 2 punches, and when I gave him the headbutt, he fell back. Let me go, kid, let me go. Boom. I headbutted him, and he went back to the ring. But that was his plan, to do that. Because I was a young kid, didn't know how to protect myself in the business. And that's what he wanted to do to me. He wanted to beat me up and leave me laying in the ring.
Did you ever wrestle the Sheik when you were in Detroit?
Before that, no.
Okay.
After that, yes.
Okay.
Many times.
What was it like to be in the ring with such an individual?
Well, he was a crazy man. Okay. He always carried something to pitch in your head as a blade or a chair or something. And if you see him on outside the ring, was no bad. But when you go in the ring, forget about it. Okay. But I did wrestle in Detroit, and I wrestled in Toronto, and I wrestled other places in a small town too. So I like him, but not really, because he was not doing wrestling. There was no such wrestling involved. Always with some gimmicks, chair and things like that. But when you're in that business, you do what you have to do.
Now, did the Sheik kind of let you into his real personality? Obviously, he's a successful promoter and wasn't always the crazy guy that he portrayed as you display him in the movie.
Yes, he actually did. When you see the interview of Mike Kolonis, that's actually shot in the Sheik's office at his house. The Sheik really took a liking to us, which was good. And he was around us a lot and was very much a businessman. The only time, we really saw behind, I'll tell you a little story. The only time I really saw kind of behind the curtain is a match with Ox Baker. I think he was featured that night. And I don't know what he did, but we were in the room next to him. And Don came in and said, oh, you won't believe it. I just, all that screaming we just heard, yeah, that was the Sheik and Ox Baker. And I guess the Sheik was really pissed at him. He really read him the riot act. And Ox Baker was just, really, really kowtowing to the Sheik. And I don't know what went on, but it was pretty intense. That was the only time I really saw anything like that. Normally, it was just business as usual.
This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com, and I'm just finishing up a compilation video about the original Sheik, who is a WWE Hall of Famer, and I wanted to do a clip for the end of this video, so I'm going to mix this clip into my compilation on the original Sheik, Ed Farhat, who of course is a legend in Detroit wrestling, very possibly the greatest heel of all time, never ever broke kayfabe. I have not seen any footage of him out there out of character. The only thing I ever saw of the original Sheik out of character was a clip from a talk show where they interview promoter Ed Farhat talking about the original Sheik. And there's video of the Sheik, and it's the Sheik playing himself as the promoter, describing the Sheik's personality. I've listened to that like 30 or 40 times because he's one of my all-time favorites. By far the most attacked wrestler of all time. He really made people believe. You could easily buy into that character, despite what a lot of people think, even back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, people knew wrestling was predetermined. But back then, the wrestlers had enough respect for their profession to not constantly rub it in people's faces that it was predetermined. So he's one of my favorites. I'll answer some of your questions, and we will include this in the compilation. Mario says, how come there's never interviews with the Sheik? I've never heard him talk. He had managers. Of course, Eddie the Brain Creechman, Abdullah Farouk, who was the Grand Wizard. Sabu, his nephew, would manage him from time to time, who, by the way, the Blood Hunter beat Sabu earlier this year. The Blood Hunter probably is the heel in wrestling today that is the closest to the Sheik out of all the wrestlers. But why didn't the Sheik talk? Because he kept kayfabe. He was not supposed to be able to speak English, and they protected that. So that's one of the reasons why he was one of my all-time favorites. He didn't have to do moonsaults. He did do some crazy hardcore stuff in his later days, but overall, he didn't have to do much to get a crowd reaction. And I really miss the days where wrestlers were attacked. And now you have wrestlers like Sami Zayn having fans kicked out of buildings for calling them names that offend them, or Cody Rhodes saying that if a fan is rude to him on Twitter, then he's not going to wrestle the wrestler that the fan wants him to wrestle because the fan offended him for rudeness, like Cody Rhodes did in my case. The Sheik was actually attacked on a regular basis, and it was just part of the job for him. So those type of wrestlers are few and far between these days. We're in the time, with a few exceptions, but we're in the time of the pussy wrestlers, and it's unfortunate, but that's why there's very little interest in wrestling these days. The current product, there's still interest in the old stuff, shoot interviews and so forth, but the days of the characters, the believable characters, like the Sheik, as Nacho Man says that he's in his top 3 favorites. Woody says some wrestlers today behave like children. True. Connor feels bad for Sabu too. I feel bad for him too, for the beating he took from the Blood Hunter earlier this year. And Anthony says pussy wrestlers for sure. It's too bad what it's become. It's not the Sheik days anymore. I wish I could have met him. Never met him. One of my favorites.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.
Hey, are you ready to take your audio game up to the next level? Do you need post-production help in cleaning up your mixes or enhancing the audio for your videos? Or maybe you have a podcast and you need some help making it sound a little bit more professional. Or maybe you want to launch a podcast or a YouTube channel for the first time ever. Or maybe you need original music for an intro or outro. I'm here to tell you that those are possible. You can have your own podcast. You can have a good YouTube channel with good sounding audio. I am here to help. I have a very public email, landonbumgarner@gmail.com, or hit me up on social media at landonbumgarner on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and SoundCloud. Let's make your goals happen.